For a while on Friday morning, it looked like a second straight UFC pay-per-view might lose its main event. But unlike early September in Edmonton, the fates transpired to keep Saturday night's interim lightweight title on the UFC 216 docket. After Tony Ferguson weighed in at 155 pounds during Friday morning's official weigh-ins in Las Vegas, challenger Ferguson-Lee kept officials waiting until the very last minute, literally. Then, Lee stepped onto the scale right as the clock struck 11 a.m. PT and Nevada State Athletic Commission Executive Director Bob Bennett announced had weighed in at 156 pounds. That's good enough for a normal lightweight fight, but title fights require that lightweights weigh in at a maximum of 155 pounds if they're going to challenge for the belt, so it looked for a moment as if Lee would have the chance to contend. Then, Bennett turned to the media and announced that Lee would need medical clearance but would be given an extra hour to hit weight. Technically, that's allowed in the NAC rulebook, but few people had any memory of the rule being exercised. An hour later, Lee stepped on the scale and hit the needed championship weight, so Saturday night's main event will go ahead as planned. It's impossible to overstate how big a blow it would have been for the UFC 216 card had the fight been cancelled. It's got a relatively strong lineup of fights from top to bottom, but the Lee-Ferguson matchup really is the big selling point. That's especially true because of the specter of Conor McGregor that hangs over the fight. Officially the UFC's lightweight champion, McGregor hasn't fought since last November, and it's widely believed that, if he does return to the octagon, it will be for the third fight in his trilogy against Nate Diaz. But if Lee or Ferguson were to go out and put on a star-making performance on Saturday night, there would be increased pressure on McGregor to actually return and unify the 155-pound champion. Given the money that any fight with McGregor brings in, that makes Saturday night's interim lightweight belt as lucrative an opportunity as any fighter has had in the UFC this year. It would have been especially unfair to Ferguson, who was in a similar situation earlier in the year but had his interim lightweight championship fight against Khabib Nurmagomedov cancelled when the Russian struggled with his weight cut. Of course, while it's good news that the fight is going ahead, the entire ordeal once again brought into focus the fact that the lengths fighters go to in order to make weight are incredibly dangerous. It's time that the UFC, and athletic commissions around the world, revamped the weight division limits so that fighters have more choice when it comes to choosing a weight class. Fight cancelled while the Lee-Ferguson fight is going ahead. It wasn't all good news at Friday's weigh-ins. The UFC 216 featured preliminary fight between former Bellator champion Will Brooks and Nick Lentz was cancelled due to medical issues for Lentz. While it wasn't the biggest fight on the card, it was still expected to be a competitive matchup between two fighters with very high ceilings. A flyweight fight between Marco Beltran and Matt Schnell will be moved up on the card and act as the featured preliminary fight. More of the same Friday afternoon saw the UFC roll out 6 fighters who will be squaring off in early November for the mammoth UFC 217 card in New York City. It was a list of fighters that included middleweight champion Michael Bisping and Canadian fight legend Georges St. Pierre, and it basically went exactly as expected. St. Pierre tried to stay humble and position himself as the underdog, while Bisping basically said whatever trash talk he could think of. It's nothing we haven't seen before from the two of them, but after 3 years in which every UFC star has tried to position themselves as the second coming of McGregor and the baddest trash talker on the planet, it all rang a little bit hollow. The matchup between St. Pierre and Bisping doesn't need bad blood to sell, and it's hard not to wonder if the UFC would be better off selling the fight as a matchup between two longtime stars instead of trying to manufacture a rivalry that doesn't seem to really exist. Around the octagon, apparently Anthony Johnson and Daniel Cormier are bad-mouthing each other about some sort of nonsense. That's cool, but Johnson is retired and has been beat twice by the light heavyweight champion, so this story is not a story. It's nothing. Ray Borg weighed in at 125 pounds and didn't get sick on Friday, so he's fighting Demetrius Johnson for the lightweight title. Sorry Edmonton fans, you guys deserved this one. If Derek Lewis beats Fabricio Werdum on Saturday night, we all know exactly who he's going to call out. It's going to be Francis Ngannou. There's no question. Twitter.com/Austin_9